Hi, my name is Ginny, also known as Two-Thirds Lotus, and this clip is part of my series analyzing the Essential Bukowski, edited by Abel DeBrito. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as it was streamed on Twitch, with all the imperfections and tangents of a live stream. If you want to learn more or catch me live, make sure to check out the description, otherwise enjoy the incredible work of Charles Bukowski.
Let's read poetry. Let's talk about poetry. I like doing that. The Genius of the Crowd by Charles Bukowski. Nope, not yet. I have to change this to say that we're currently reading The Genius of the Crowd by Charles Bukowski, so the pinned message is correct. Currently reading, quote, The Genius of the Crowd, quote, by Charles Bukowski. Pin for anyone coming in. There is enough. The genius of the crowd. Do these things right. There is enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being to supply any given army on any given day. And the best at murder are those who preach against it, and the best at hate are those who preach love, and the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. Those who preach God need God. Those who preach peace do not have peace. Those who preach love do not have love. Beware the preachers. Beware the knowers. Beware those who are always reading books. Beware those who either detest poverty or are proud of it. Beware those quick to praise, for they need praise in return. Beware those quick to censure. They are afraid of what they do not know. Beware those who seek constant crowds. They are nothing alone. Beware the average man, the average woman. Beware their love. Their love is average, seeks average, but there is genius in their hatred. There is enough genius in their hatred to kill you, to kill anybody. Not wanting solitude, not understanding solitude, they will attempt to destroy anything that differs from their own. Not being able to create art, they will not understand art. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. Not being able to love fully, they will believe your love incomplete, and they will hate you. And their hatred will be perfect, like a shining diamond, like a knife, like a mountain, like a tiger, like hemlock. Their finest art. That's the end of the poem. I thought it was another page. Their finest art. Genius of the Crowd by Charles Bukowski. This is the only time I think I've seen Charles Bukowski so far use all caps. And like everything is capitalized. There's a few things that aren't, but this is clearly trying to emote a lot of emotion, a lot of expression. An ode to hypocrisy, the way you read it. Yeah, why is it an ode to hypocrisy, Ra? Nice poem? Yeah, I like it. So far, I dig it. And colors of pens, so I can write on this very nice poem. You agree mostly? Mostly with the poem or mostly with Ra? Also nice, also since you asked about Kant earlier, there's a writer called Baltasar Gracian, who was the two books I recommend, the Kritikon and the Art of Prudence. I've heard the name Gracian. Yes on both? Gotcha. I'm going to read this again. Read things twice. It's good for you. The genius of the crowd. There is enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being to supply any given army on any given day. And the best at murder are those who preach against it. And the best at hate are those who preach love. And the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. Those who preach God need God. Those who preach peace do not have peace. Those who preach love do not have love. Beware the preachers. Beware the knowers. Beware those who are always reading books. Beware those who either detest poverty or are proud of it. Beware those quick to praise, for they need praise in return. Beware those quick to censure, they are afraid of what they do not know. Beware those who seek constant crowds, they are nothing alone. Beware the average man, the average woman. Beware their love. Their love is average, seeks average. But there is genius in their hatred. There is enough genius in their hatred to kill you. To kill anybody. Not wanting solitude, not understanding solitude, they will attempt to destroy anything that differs from their own. Not being able to create art, they will not understand art. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. Not being able to love fully, they will believe your love incomplete, and then they will hate you. And their hatred will be perfect, like a shining diamond, like a knife, like a mountain, like a tiger, like hemlock. Their finest art. The genius of the crowd. Charles Bukowski. sounds almost like a Bible passage with all the beware and warnings. Yeah, definitely something very authoritative. It could even be like a sign that you see on the street that's like, or like a billboard, it's like, beware of something, Beware of dog. Those kinds of signs. Beware of oncoming train. Their failure as creators as a failure of the world reminds of those failed comedians who become angry right-wing pundits. True. Seeing that as a failure of the world, it's probably reasonable. It's probably one of these people. So there's a lot in this poem. Love how he screams like that. Yeah. Bukowski is normally pretty chill with his writing. Like this is the next poem. It's like barely punctuated, barely capitalized, and so it's pretty specific for the genius of the crowd that it's written as such. So, and yeah, there are some. It gives this extreme sense of like yelling authority, and that could be like biblical, like a passage saying, "Beware of whatever sin," blah blah blah, or some kind of notice, just like beware of dog that someone might put on their gate if they have a vicious dog, right? So let's break this down. What does this mean? There's enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being to supply any given army on any given day. It's very preachy, ironically. Yes. There's a lot of... So, there's some incredibly bold and like loud statements made by Bukowski that are entirely not backed up. And this is probably one quality of being preachy. To be so in one's own ideology, let's take the Christian minister who just assumes that these things are truths and so just yells them at you. The street preacher. Like Bukowski kind of sounds like the crazy man on the corner here, like beware the end times kind of stuff. And you're like, why? And they're like, the end times are coming. Beware, the end is nigh. It kind of has this tone to it. Especially given him, let's say, shouting about how messed up society is, or how much he disagrees with societal tendencies. Not just Christian preachers, yeah, that is true. I have the most experience with them. There's enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being. This is a constant topic of Bukowski's. An average human being, an average person. And we'll see later, as he intertwines the ideas of art, Bukowski often considers the person who is just going along with society and its ideas and its values, that average person, to be quite a bad thing, and to be fairly irreconcilable with the nature of being an artist. So one way we can see the average human being is the non-artist, is like the 9-to-5 worker, is the bland, suburban house and a white picket fence and 2 kids kind of person. The kind of person who Bukowski also says, like, probably beats their spouse. This is Bukowski's opinion on these people. They're all sort of putting up a front on their lives and living something kind of not genuine. And this I'll say from reading past poems of his. 28 of them or something so far. And the best at murder are those who preach against it. And the best at hate are those who preach love. And the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. And perhaps this fairly quickly aligns with that idea of wearing some sort of a mask that the average person might do. They're just trying to blend into the crowd, be normal, and it is in this that they're sort of taking on some sort of societal evil. But this also does, as Ross said earlier, just speak to hypocrisy. The best at murder are those who preach against it, and the best at hate are those who preach love, and the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. Now, these are fascinating statements because you look at, I don't know, lots of generally activist types. They might talk about peace and love and not doing war and preaching against murder, or pacifists, or some sort of monk in Tibet might say these things. And one interpretation is that Bukowski is just saying any person who preaches against murder is good at murder. Anyone who preaches against love or preaches against hate, preaches love is hateful. Anyone who preaches peace is good at war. I'm not sure he's exactly saying this flat out. This is something Bukowski often does, says these big, bold claims that are more nuanced than what he is probably really writing on the page. Because I think Bukowski also, in many ways, speaks against war and hate and living a sort of love. He talks about living like a loving life in many cases, in his odd way, but he does. I'll preach against being gorgeous and smart, and then you'll be gorgeous and smart. Who's to say you aren't already, Stylish Phil? And the best at murder are those who preach against it. So maybe there's some more nuance than just anyone who says, let's not do murder is a murderer or is good at murder. Because that just seems sort of large and overblown. And this is probably a point to speak out boldly when he's saying slightly more nuanced things. Preaching. What is preaching? Preaching is probably telling someone else they need something, or saying that something is needed in the world. If I'm preaching against murder, saying I want less murder to happen, if I'm preaching against love, or preaching love, I'm saying I want there to be less hate. If I'm preaching peace, I'm saying something about the world and its current situation. One way to look at this could be that preaching and action are very different things. To preach is just to speak. But what does preaching against murder accomplish? Chat, murder is bad. Do not do murder. I believe that you should not do murder. It is the right thing to not murder people. What have I accomplished in terms of stopping murder in the world by saying that? Nothing, probably. In Stylish Fail, you never let us do anything fun. Exactly. You might want to murder someone more. But that is to say that speaking doesn't really do anything. This could be one interpretation of what Bukowski is saying on a more nuanced level. Perhaps it is those who actually create peace in the world and stop murder and create love in the world who are worthwhile, and anyone else who societally just says, oh yeah, like, murder's bad. Because everyone kind of agrees, like, murder is bad. Right? In most cases. Some people are pretty stoked about murdering a CEO. Cool. But I think if you ask people, like, is murder bad? The majority of people are going to say, like, yeah, don't murder people. The average human being will say this. And yet murder also happens, and it is also an average person who in a fit of, tortured existence as a human being murders someone. Anyone can be a murderer. Just have to be in like a bad mindset. So, like, I could be a murderer. Stylish Fail could be a murderer. Young Selena could be a murderer. Given the right circumstances. Despite most of us maybe saying, like, murder is bad. Also, welcome back, Young Selena. You could be a murderer. You're translating a poet that you like. Excellent. So yeah. Anyone can be a murderer, and those who just preach against and half-assedly societally say murder is bad and I have some wishy-washy go with the flow moral values is probably not a very moral person. That's an interpretation. Stylish Fail also said preaching has a religious connotation. So this could be specifically speaking against religion. But other than the word preach, there's not actually that much mention of it. So we'll have to see. Let's keep reading though. Murder is a moral/illegal killing, so murder is bad by definition. Yeah, like preaching against murder doesn't really do anything. Those who preach God need God. Those who preach peace do not have peace. Those who preach love do not have love. Beware the preachers. Beware the knowers. So, those who preach God need God. There's a lot of ways we could read this line. If you're preaching God and you need other people to have it, it is because maybe God gives you some comfort and some feeling of safety, let's say. And other people, if others are like you, are like me, a sort of conformity, if I can turn them also into believers of God, then I will be safer in my conformity in the crowd. If I'm preaching God, it is because I want others to be like me. If I preach peace, there is some reason that I am not fulfilled enough in myself that I need to impose the needing of peace on other people, sort of a projection. We would call this in like psychology, right? Projection. Those who preach love do not have love. And beware the preachers. Beware the knowers. Someone who claims they know and know better than you, right? If I'm so confident in my belief that I'm going to impose it on someone else without really knowing them, this is perhaps a dangerous thing. That's maybe not a person you would like to be around. Beware the preachers, beware the knowers. Because they're missing something too. They want something in you that reflected back upon them is going to make them comfortable and the same as others. The idea of wanting others to be the same as you fits in with the idea of the crowd and the average human being. So this is probably the interpretation that I like so far. Also, didn't have it all on screen. Beware those who are always reading books. I love this little stanza here. Why would Bukowski say this? What does reading books have to do with the crowd, or being an average human, or needing God and preaching God? How are these things related? Anyone can take a stab if you want to. I think I have an idea. Young Selena, you were translating Umit Yasar Oguz Khan. And yes, they are Turkish, and that's why neither me nor Stylish Fail know who they are. That's why I don't like thou shalt not steal commandment. It presupposes a moral framework of ownership. Well, yeah, that's just like how society works, though. Like, we usually make rules to describe our values. Rules do not, change or create our values. Like Christian Puritanism, all the different Christian parts, all of this is pretty related to, ownership and capitalism in a lot of ways. This reminds me of the old canard that all homophobes are gay. Yeah, kind of. Potentially. That, I guess, from the name. Books are theoretical, not lived experience, and theory and practice are only the same in theory. That is maybe an interpretation. I like that potentially. So, this would be some kind of theory and not real. That could be the case. I wasn't here while you were reading that poet. We'll read it again. Don't worry. But I think they wrote the last thing can be because they are living in the world of a book. Because books are a sort of escapism. Books allow us to escape and live in a world other than our own. Potentially true as well. Another idea, perhaps? Those who are always reading books. A book is someone else's ideas. They're always living, essentially, externally. Rather than having some of their own genuine direction, they are probably looking for something, perhaps do not have peace in some way, and are looking to find it in the preaching of someone else. So maybe that is to say, beware those who preach, but also beware those who allow themselves to be preached to. That's probably my interpretation. But looking at escape, those who are the first, books are theoretical, not lived experience. So those who do not live. This goes with the interpretation of preaching as speaking. Those who speak without action, which is kind of the same as the book. The book is speech without action. Yeah, you can call me Lotus or Ginny or any nickname you could come up with from Ginny. So gin and juice, gin and tonic are common. So the stylish fail interpretation is that theory is what the books are. They're not practical. Not practical in that they are not actionable. You said you like my interpretation. I like yours as well, though. This makes sense. There's this idea of thinking and hoping and preaching and saying, I want this, I want this. And yeah, those leftists who just talk theory, who don't put anything into practice. There are some activists who spend way too much time reading books and not enough time being activists. And maybe that's the interpretation of this poem, is that these people sit around and do nothing. And they just look at what they want and how they want the world to change, and they don't change it. And this probably makes one susceptible to, like, snapping in some way, where you take drastic action because you don't really understand how to act. You only understand big ideas that are so far beyond you, and then you just murder someone because none of it makes sense because you're not actually doing anything with your life. I like this interpretation deeply. I also like mine. The externalizing into society, into other people. And these are probably slightly similar. And then there's young Selena's. What does preach mean? Preach means to, I guess, speak with a sort of... so it comes from religion. A preacher is someone who is like the person who stands up and talks about religion in front of like a bunch of religious people. That's a preacher. So preach would be the action of doing that, of sort of speaking your religion to another person. We also have come to use preach in other contexts where someone might sound preachy if they are just trying to get you to adopt their ideas and not really listening to you and just really only care about changing your mind. So that's a preaching of sort. Yeah, like an imam, a rabbi, a priest, a Brahmin, a whatever. All of these things. King Poyo, it's been a while. You have good news, you started a band. What do you play? That's very cool, that's exciting. Yeah, what kind of band? So, there was also young Selena's interpretation of the books as an escape. Those who are always reading just have their head in the book and are just trying to get into something else and really not pay attention to real life. And maybe this is some way related to to like just existing in theory and the ephemeral and the not real, is that it's just not actually engaging with the actual world and existence. Going on to the next page. Actually, before we do, it's about time for a little ad break and me to take a little stand up and walk around my room, stretch my legs break. So do a little bit of self-care. Don't watch these ads, and I'll be back in a second. And I will answer your question, young Selena, in just a moment when I come back. I'll be back. I'm still right here. I haven't left at all. Ain't that the illusion? Life is Maya. Illusion. Not life. Reality. Your screen. Me. I'm an illusion. Void. Null. Nothing. Empty. hum hem. All right. I'm back. Welcome back. Still Ginny. Still Two-Thirds Lotus. I stood up and walked around. You have stage names. That's cute. Guitarist and singer. Gotcha. You have a question. Do I read suggestion poets? Like, if you suggested a poet for me to read on stream, would I read it? Is that the question? And then... duo, yeah, cool. Yes, okay. Yeah. So, sometimes. Sort of depends. So the submission, like I've done this before. Stylish Fail has suggested poets and other people have suggested poets and sent me things. Generally, the only thing is do it through like the submission form. Reading the Bukowski is a series that I'm doing. This is like the 30th Bukowski poem we've done. But I would be happy to read like a one-off poem of some other like published poet. And it would just be, you would submit that through the form with the exclamation point submit, and then I would read it. It would be slightly less of like a priority for me, since right now I'm trying to read lots of submissions of people who might be in the anthology that we're going to publish, that kind of stuff. So, yes, definitely submit poets who you suggest, especially if it's someone you've translated, like that's super cool. And if you send the actual like a typing out or copied in or a file with the text is much preferred. Like if people say go read this poem by this poet, I'm almost never gonna do that just because it's like really annoying. I have to go find it. But if people actually send me like a link to the poem, much more helpful. There you go. You're making TikToks, but you forgot how to do your proper setup for videos. Okay, let's read this entire poem again, and that'll help Solina and Poyo catch up on what we're doing, and then we'll keep analyzing. This one was sick. The Genius of the Crowd by Charles Bukowski. There is enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being to supply any given army on any given day. And the best at murder are those who preach against it. And the best at hate are those who preach love. And the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. Poyo, you're good. Those who preach God need God. Those who preach peace do not have peace. Those who preach love do not have love. Beware the preachers. Beware the knowers. Beware those who are always reading books. Beware those who either detest poverty or are proud of it. Beware those quick to praise, for they need praise in return. Beware those quick to censure. They are afraid of what they do not know. Beware those who seek constant crowds. They are nothing alone. Beware the average man, the average woman. Beware their love. Their love is average, seeks average, but there is genius in their hatred. There is enough genius in their hatred to kill you, to kill anybody. Not wanting solitude, not understanding solitude, they will attempt to destroy anything that differs from their own. Not being able to create art, they will not understand art. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. Not being able to love fully, they will believe your love incomplete, and they will hate you. And their hatred will be perfect, like a shining diamond, like a knife, like a mountain, like a tiger, like hemlock, their finest art. I want to throw out one idea before going on to the next page. The genius of the crowd. The genius of the average person. So how does the average human being have enough hatred, enough violence to supply any given army on any given day? Like, this doesn't really make sense. It's just disproportional. But one idea I just had, maybe, the crowd, society, general public sentiment is something that is deeply associated with, especially in a somewhat democratic nation, government. Someone who is of the crowd and part of the sort of status quo is someone who will probably just support what their government does. And if the government is one of violence and hatred, and a standing army and an army actively fighting in other nations, then being part of the crowd is being part of the violence. So this poem, in a way, could be a sort of activism against that, like, being a sheep sort of idea. We'll have to see as we go forward, though. Beware those who either detest poverty or are proud of it. Good line. So, those who detest poverty. This makes sense. Your average person, we talked about the maybe average American person, the suburban, 2 kids, whatever, white picket fence, living in a redlined and gentrified part of America. Detesting poverty. This is just a fear of what is different. You submitted and came back. Excellent, Celine. And those who are proud of poverty. 2.3 kids in a golden lap. Exactly. And then those who are proud of poverty. What do we think that means? Being proud of poverty. What does a person who is proud of poverty look like? Because Bukowski kind of talks about how useful it is as an artist to starve. Is that being proud of poverty? This could be an interpretation. Bukowski may say I am unreliable, as he often does, and invites us to, in fact, beware of Bukowski. Now, because he is a, starving artist who's proud of that. Now, it could be that the person who detests poverty is also the person who's proud of poverty. Because the person who detests poverty may be proud of their wealth. And wealth is relative. I can only be wealthy if someone else is poor. It's pretty much how it works. Having is a fairly comparative thing. And so, if I am proud of wealth, I am in some way proud of the system that creates wealth and division and the poverty that I also detest. Wealth being the general state, perhaps, of the crowd in America. There are those that think they are more down to earth and real because therefore that as well. Poverty is some sort of virtue. That is an issue. There's that guy who decided to try to be homeless, and he was a millionaire, and then wanted to start from nothing and prove that he could grind his way to the top and make $1 million in a year, and then made $60K. So and he was white and heterosexual and a man. So that poverty is somehow some kind of down to earth, disingenuous, perhaps of an artist. Any of these work. Beware those quick to praise, for they need praise in return. Beware those quick to censure. They are afraid of what they do not know. I think this reinforces this whole idea of, needing the praise and praising, being afraid of what they do not know. Just as any of these bewares is really beware of people in the crowd. Right? People who are censoring to protect their in-group and their echo chamber and their microcosm and their, their worldview. And those who praise and expect praise are just engaging in this similar circle jerk of worldview. Yeah, and the guy had connections and social background and all of that. Beware those who seek constant crowds. They are nothing alone. Speaks to that same idea. This idea of the crowd and just being part of the mob of people and the mindless masses being bad seems to be shaping up as the sort of thesis of the poem. Again, that line break. They are nothing alone. Because they are, this line break maybe implies something together. And that something is violent and hateful. It is detesting people who are not like them. It is fueling military machines. It is, being brutal and unethical toward the poor. So they are something together, but alone who are they? Because they don't have real values. Have values of your own. Don't just read books. Don't just listen to the preaching and don't preach. All those people are part of that system, Bukowski says. I'm not sure how much I like the message, but I like the poem. Like, there's some truth here, there's also some overblown stuff. Beware the average man, the average woman, beware their love. Their love is average, seeks average. A person in this, I guess, in group, who is in their, who has divided themselves into their, like, microcosm, is only going to love someone who they see as also in. And if you accept that love and turn out to not be in, then, well, that's not going to work very well. The love is going to go away. But there's genius in their hatred. There's enough genius in their hatred to kill you, to kill anybody. So, the genius of the crowd. What does this phrase mean? This phrase has meaning. Are we familiar with the phrase genius of the crowd? Or wisdom of the crowd? It's a late night, so you might go to sleep. Do go to sleep, young Selena. Sleeping is good for you. Get rest. Nearly 2 p.m.? a.m.? Good night. Can you ask a question if it's related to the poem or these kinds of things? I asked you a question, though, chat, and that is, are we familiar with genius or wisdom of the crowd? Have a good night, young Selena. Have we heard this phrase? Perhaps? No? Yes? Maybe? Wisdom of the crowd. You are not aware. Okay. So, wisdom of the crowd. I'm just reading this off of like Google or Wikipedia. Wisdom of the crowd is the collective opinion of a diverse and independent group of individuals rather than a single expert. This process, while not new to the information age, has been pushed into the mainstream spotlight by social information sites such as Quora, Reddit, Stack Exchange, Wikipedia, and Yahoo Answers, and other web resources that rely on collective human knowledge. Explanation for this phenomenon is that there's idiosyncratic noise associated with each individual judgment. Taking the average over a large number of responses will get somewhere toward canceling the effect of the noise. So basically, everyone is kind of right and different about certain things and kind of right and wrong about other things. And when you average everyone out and have a large enough group of people, they come to the correct answer. And the one thing you see, the example, is you have a big jar of jelly beans or some small object, coins, big jar of coins, and you ask 1,000 people, how many coins are in the jar? You ask 1,000 people. And some people are going to give you way too many. Some people are going to give you way too few. And usually if you run this experiment with a large enough sample size, you get like pretty close to the real number. And so the wisdom of the crowd is that with enough people, a sort of collective opinion, collective value becomes more powerful and more accurate than solitude. Solitude even says it here at the end. And their genius has converged, maybe in modern times, to be hateful and push people out and just sort of be kind of awful and detest poverty and not understand others and not create art. And this people think is okay because it's average, because it's the genius of the crowd. but Bukowski doesn't agree. King Poyo, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans. That is what LGBT stands for. You can look that up, you know. There's genius in their hatred. So their hatred, why is it genius? Because it's the genius of the crowds. It is collective. By being nobody alone, you are part of the collective and you have that genius and that complacent hatred by being like a member of this society. It was a joke? Oh, a straight answer. That's dumb. There's enough genius in their hatred to kill you, to kill anybody. And yeah, it is that. Society will just kill. Society, government, all of this props up war and hate and evil. And being part of the crowd is being part of all of that. Not wanting solitude, not understanding solitude, they will attempt to destroy anything. This is like conservative reactionaries. Conservative, reactionary ideology. Like, and in the literal meaning of these words. Not like whatever people call American conservatives or conservatives in whatever your country is. Being conservative, not wanting change, reactionary, acting as a reaction to that change. I want to be part of what is and what is status quo and what is normal. And I don't want to be alone in my ideas. So I believe what those around me believe. And I don't understand that solitude. And if I am faced with that solitude, with any threat to my identity, to my being, a solitude in anything, identity, wealth, that's not how you spell wealth, like status and social standing, you will react and lash out and try to destroy. And you will hate. And what do you know? People who think like this are those who are hateful and in America say elect fascists and take away rights from certain groups and detest poverty and want to, you know, kick homeless people out of the only place they have to live, which is the street, and assume they'll just disappear. And the same people who also, in fact, in America, preach. Like, this is somehow extraordinarily topical of modern America, because these are people who preach, do not murder. They preach love, a love of God, a Christian God. So this could just be a fundamentally American poem. Bukowski's an American poet. Or it could be speaking more broadly to that idea of the conservative reactionary of the crowd type who fears threats to their identity and being and their microcosm and their safe little bubble. And it just reflects American society so well because we have half of our country as conservative reactionaries. There's another page, though. Anything that differs from their own. This is kind of an unfortunate page break because it connects back to just what we were saying. But I want to say the wisdom of the crowd is the greatest fool divided by the number of people. Exactly. It goes down to the lowest. Well, no, it doesn't. I don't think that's. I mean, it's a good joke, but the theory just says it's the average. it's the greatest fool and the greatest smart person averaged to the middle. Like, at least that's the point of the theory. It could more practically wind up like, yeah, you weren't serious. Okay. Yeah. It's a joke probably that works quite well because that's how the wisdom of the crowd more likely plays out in like numerical situations when it's not a matter of fact but of opinion. The dumbest and loudest voices get heard. Not being able to create art, they will not understand art. So, yeah. Art is something that challenges like the mind. It expands, it shows perspective. And the interesting thing is I find that like the people who most hate, let's say, modern art and things that are really avant-garde and expressive, and even the people who really hate them tend to be conservative and old head who just want to like listen to their classical music from the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. Whereas the people who are like punk and DIY and avant-garde and doing new things tend to be progressive and want change. This is purely talking in terms of like identity, not even like political, or just in terms of art. And so the people in the crowd cannot create art. They cannot create art because they cannot create something new. All they have is the ideas that go around in their head. And the interesting thing is that the art of old was progressive at the time. Syphilis was called the composer's disease. And Mozart definitely had it. Because they were all super queer. And, or queer to the degree that they could be. And super promiscuous and sexual and progressive in their ideas and free thinking. Because that is the creation of art. And now, 300 years later, these people become conservative and old and classical, even though they were once new. Because we're out of touch with this art, and we've created associations around like status and wealth associated with like classical music. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. Status fail you mentioned earlier. The conservative comedian who becomes a right-wing political pundit. I think this is like almost exactly what Bukowski is saying. Like, I agree with your analysis there fully. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. I am unable to understand what it means to create something new, engaging, novel, artistic, and when the artistic world rejects it because my values so fundamentally misalign with what it is saying, with what art is, then like, you know, I will blame the world for it and say they have, you say like Ben Shapiro, you'll say they have some kind of left-wing cancel culture wokeism agenda, and they'll blame the world for it. You can't chat in the app still? Anyone else here have this issue? No? I mean, I stream. I don't really watch Twitch that much. It might be that you have it, if you have it like open on like 2 devices. I don't know. Not being able to love fully, they will believe your love incomplete. And then they will hate you. So it is through one's incomplete understanding of the world that they believe others to be incomplete. And this is through all means of identity, socioeconomic status, religion, just broader cultural ideas. They don't understand how to sort of love anything truly, broadly, deeply, and so they see everything else outside of them as incomplete. Going back to the start, those who preach God need God. People who want a specific thing in the world are incomplete in their own way. And that is the same as the person who does not accept someone. That works, Stylish Fail. Thanks for the bits. And their hatred will be perfect. Like a shining diamond, like a knife, like a mountain, like a tiger, like hemlock. Their finest art. And, I think it being perfect is, I mean, we say genius before, but it is that it aligns with the values of the crowd. If all of your conception is based off of the crowd will agree with all of your hatred. You can only cheer in the app. Fascinating. Like a diamond, something perfect. Like a knife. It cuts. Like a mountain. It has this volume, it has this weight of the world. I don't know. Bukowski just says a bunch of things. Their finest art. And what did we say art was? Art was new. It was novel. It was something different. It was a new way to do something. And I think, reactionary conservatives in circles that are generally reactionary and conservative will celebrate taking down or just like the way that they hate people. If someone is really proficient at taking down a progressive thinker, then they'll be celebrated as basically an artist of conservatism. And that is their art. The only thing they can do that is new is exacerbate the hate that already exists within the crowd. So many people revel in cruelty and liberal tears, etc. Yeah. Exactly. I had a YouTube short about like capitalism, and then someone said like all Marxists are low testosterone men who are sensitive and pathetic. And I'm like, well, the low testosterone's intentional. But yeah, it's like, stop whining, you Marxist little soy boy. Like, I don't know. Hey, I'm not a man. So yeah, and the interesting thing is like I'm not sure someone who's maybe like quote unquote part of the crowd would understand a poem like this, which probably makes it really excellent as a piece of poetry. Just because these like ideas don't make sense without a framework of progressivism as opposed to conservatism. Now, the poem says to beware of the crowd, and this is something I'm unsure about as like a message, because I do find that pushing artists and like progressive groups to be further progressive in their own sort of microcosms only ends up alienating people from each other. I could see this poem almost as an omen toward the hyper divided society we live in now, where Bukowski says, beware of the normies and the conservative people, keep being like a deranged artist, because they're hateful. Like, it's sort of throwing scorn back in the other direction. And you say, Stajfeld, the poem misses the idea of community. Yeah, like, community and actual connection and understanding other people, probably regardless of views, is my preferred way to look at this and remedy this, is to realize a sort of humanness instead of lean into a progressivism that, while is probably good, at least from my progressive framework, only serves to push people further away and accomplish nothing. And it makes him say some contradictory things, IMO. Yeah, and it is a very contradictory poem, and I think that's characteristic of Bukowski. But there are some very true truths to this. The crowds and the passive masses are violent, and to be passive is to be complicit. And to try to change others implies some lack of safety with the situation that one feels they're in, to create more of a conformist world, to reject ideas of others by imposing our own. I agree with a lot of this. It just, to me, lacks a further sentiment of saying, like, I guess Bukowski, the deeply progressive against the deeply conservative, is half the problem, in my opinion. He seems to think that to be part of a whole strips autonomy and agency. I mean, it does. I do think that, like, other people are an infringement on autonomy and agency. Fundamentally. I agree with this sentiment. But they also create autonomy and agency in other ways. And I think within the like conservative framework, particularly, other people and conservative people are an infringement on autonomy because they want what already is and don't want change and fear change. And that is an infringement on autonomy because autonomy is one's own action in any circumstance, be it what is or what is not and what is change. So the two-party system does encourage a dividing of the people in two. Yes, absolutely. Morning dew on the grass. We're just finishing up a Bukowski poem. I think the interpretation kind of came together through the poem and we looked back. Are there any other questions about the poem? We have a system of many parties who need to work together. Yeah. And this is a fundamentally American poem because there are two pillars. Well, I don't think, maybe it's not a fundamentally American poem. It speaks to conservatism against progressivism. And this is the fundamental tension. And I think it says that society as a whole is a conservative body. And that progressives, deep progressives, artists, are not a part of that, is one aspect. And that the progressive, the artist, the creator, the Bukowski, is threatened. Bukowski is threatened as well. I think it is very easily understood outside the US context. Yeah. It speaks to much more than it. Yeah, universal tensions. Now it is like very understandably influenced by the American two-party system, one which sort of claims to have a conservative and a progressive party. The reality is that both are conservative because both are society, and both are the average human, and both are the crowd and the machine. And that's unfortunately the delusion that a lot of people who like vote for Democrats in America are under, is they think if I vote for a Democrat, progressive, this is the progressive party. No, it's a slightly less conservative party. And the people Bukowski talks about, who are threatened by the crowd, are the ones who truly lie outside of the societal, the Overton window as a whole. And in America, this is one person, and it's a different person in another country that is generally more progressive or generally more conservative. It's just the artist, the queer as in like different, the one who is an outcast, the poor person in a rich world, who is not accepted. My classes on vote capture in different political systems was fascinating, as in, who do you want to appeal to? Oh, it's fascinating, yeah. Like, how to appeal demographically. But before diving into politics, I think that's like a suitable interpretation of this poem. Progressivism, conservatism. Not in what Americans call it. People might get mad about American politics seeing this like interpretation. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about it's about society, American, if you're an American person getting like annoyed over this interpretation, and everyone else who just doesn't fit into that system as a whole, which is poor people, queer people, artists, truly progressive people. Basically all the fun people. The genius of the crowd. There's enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being to supply any given army on any given day. And the best at murder are those who preach against it, and the best at hate are those who preach love, and the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. Those who preach God need God. Those who preach peace do not have peace. Those who preach love do not have love. Beware the preachers. Beware the knowers. Beware those who are always reading books. Beware those who either detest poverty or are proud of it. Beware those quick to praise, for they need praise in return. Beware those quick to censure, they are afraid of what they do not know. Beware those who seek constant crowds, they are nothing alone. Beware the average man, the average woman. Beware their love. Their love is average, seeks average, but there is genius in their hatred. There is enough genius in their hatred to kill you, to kill anybody. Not wanting solitude, not understanding solitude, they will attempt to destroy anything. That differs from their own. Not being able to create art, they will not understand art. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. Not being able to love fully, they will believe your love incomplete, and then they will hate you. And their hatred will be perfect, like a shining diamond, like a knife, like a mountain, like a tiger, like hemlock. Their finest art. The Genius of the Crowd by Charles Bukowski. That's a good poem.
Thanks for listening to me and my thoughts on Bukowski. Make sure to check out the rest of the series if you enjoyed, and follow or stop by Twitch if you want to see more. See you there.